Hey,
Hey,
we did it.
I know, right?
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. Awesome. We can let a few more folks show up. Good to have everybody. Thank you again for taking the time to talk with us today. Where in the world are you right now?
I am in San Leandro, California right now.
San Leandro, East Bay. Okay.
Okay.
Actually was born in Fremont, so Alameda County. But
Okay.
yeah,
Hey, Mel.
yeah, it's going to be a good group today. So basically, we've talked about doing this before. I know back at the Emerald Cup, we talked about, getting together and doing an interview and obviously we're going to sit down and do something more formal, but considering everything that's going on, that's the perfect time to do an IG live and just, catch up and kind of share your story and talk about what's going on out there in the world right now. And anyway, so for those of you that don't know or that don't know you, give us a bit of your backstory. And it's a very interesting and unique story for sure. Actually, in a weird way, I also have a history with Washington and California as well. So yeah, just tell us about kind of where you're from and how you got to be where you are today.
Okay, definitely. So I was born in National City, California, which is right on the border of San Diego and Tijuana. We moved to Washington though when I was very young, like 4 years old. And both my parents though are Californian, and my dad went to Humboldt State, and so we would spend our vacations going back to Humboldt, visiting his friends that were still living in Arcata, farming, doing their thing.
Nice.
So, our family vacations were spent a mixture of like Humboldt County in particular, and then also Windsor, California, which I think is that Napa County?
I think it's Sonoma.
Sonoma. So
Yeah.
it's like that Sonoma Humboldt connection. And so I grew up
Yeah.
just being exposed to that kind of life. And both my parents, they're cannabis aficionados, and like my dad was, always part of the cannabis industry since his days at Humboldt State. And so I had a different perspective. I didn't know about it when I was younger. I didn't know my parents, liked cannabis. But when my mom found out I was smoking weed in high school, like she was upset, but she wasn't like,
Yeah.
she didn't make it seem like it was reefer madness or anything like that. So
Right.
growing up, I also participated in a lot of activism. So I was going to Hemp Fest at 15 years old, volunteering for them,
Oh, wow.
handing out flyers, and would always attend. Like when I was in high school, this girl at school commented on my MySpace, and she's like, "Were you at Hemp Fest? I just saw you on Fox News." Like, and so
Wow.
yeah, like so it's just always been a part of my life. And then I once high school was finished, I moved back. I moved to Arcata and worked on farms. Then moved to Santa Cruz, worked on farms to kind of just sustain my life. Like I'm an artist, and
Yeah.
like trimming saved my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like a
I
lot
think
of
that's I
people.
think that's when we met when you were working at SC Labs back in the day.
Okay. Yeah, so SC Labs was a huge part of my cannabis education. Like I already knew a lot about cannabinoids and different things like that, but when SC Labs offered the job to me for their community manager position, I just gained so much more knowledge, and I met so many amazing people because at the time, this was, pre-recreation in California.
Yeah.
All of the people who truly cared about the plant were getting their medicine tested through SC Labs. So
Yeah.
through that, I really like made a lot of friends, and it kind of snowballed my own business from there because people that I worked with at SC Labs, they would follow me on Instagram, and those same brands, once recreation hit, were like, "Hey, can you help us manage our social media accounts? Can you creative direct a shoot for us, or help us with brand strategy?" And so I've been doing that for nearly 3 years now.
Oh, that's awesome. So it kind of just, organically developed those concepts and
Exactly.
ideas. I know even today, getting ready for this call, we talked about the flyer, we talked about the background, and you could tell the people that care about, certain things like lighting and verbiage and fonts and somewhat of a creative myself. So I get it. And for me, like, can be kind of a perfectionist, and we can all be our own worst critic, right? And so for me, I've wanted to do a lot of this stuff for a long time. I've dabbled in different things, but finally I was just like, you know what, let's just start something, you know? So I think hats off to you for starting that a few years ago. I think you're helping other brands also coincided with you launching your own brand as well. Seems to have followed the same timeline.
Well, we're all in it together, and so it's interesting, like working with different companies like Monterey Kushco, Utopia, Blue River Terpenes, like all of those brands, Emerald Cup included. It's like we all came up together, and it's cool to just still be working with them after all these years and supporting each other.
For sure, yeah. It's a crazy story. What I love about Emerald Cup is how it kind of connects all the different brands. It's like a big family, you know. Over the years, obviously, there's just like with any family, there's the ups and downs, and there's the good and the bad. But overall, it's an amazing community. It's an amazing event. So for me, Chad North, who's actually one of my best friends, we grew up together, and his uncle is actually Tim Blake. So I got to know Tim and Taylor kind of before I even went to the Cup and knew about the Cup. And it was just, I think it had only been going for a few years when we first started going over 10 years ago, and just have always been kind of involved behind the scenes. And because I remember he's like, I think my uncle throws this event. I don't know, let's go check it out. And, you know, most Bay Area people never go north of Santa Rosa. Most people don't know that there's anything north of Santa Rosa on the 101. So our first time we went up to Area 101 up in Mendocino, and it was it was quite an experience. It was a different world for sure.
My first time at Area 101 was when I was 17. And it's so random because I didn't know what it was, and I had always passed it on road trips with my family and seen the altar. And so I had like a 35 millimeter disposable, and I was like, I want to take a picture here. And literally like looking back now, like Tim literally came out and was like, hey, like, how are you? And I was like kind of scared because like in Humboldt, you don't really want to like, you know, in the Emerald Triangle, you don't really want to like pull over and property. But I was like, I need to get this pic real quick. But like he was out there super quick. I didn't know it was like a medical dispensary.
Yeah, for sure. So, and we helped out over the years, you know, as it grew from the Triangle down to Santa Rosa, and then actually went up and lived up there for a little while. And that was a whole different experience. I always had a respect and appreciation for the community. But I grew up in the church world, and I grew up kind of conservative. And, you know, I kind of had two extremes around me. It was either like the church world, which was, you know, very conservative, or it was like the streets, which was cannabis was not, first of all, was not called cannabis, and it was not medicinal. It was a gang-related or drug-related type situation. It was a different time in the 90s, right? And so to go from those two extremes to then seeing how people lived in the Triangle was definitely an experience, definitely eye-opening. And once I saw it was real people who cared about it, and once I saw it from a different perspective, what really changed things for me was seeing when we were helping run the dispensary there at Healing Harvest Farms, like seeing the elderly come in, seeing kids come in, seeing not kids didn't come into the dispensary, but knowing that there were kids that were using cannabis, obviously with the supervision of their parents, as medicine and tinctures and different things to help with CBD or with you know, seizures and things like that. And when you kind of see that firsthand, and you see the people that this really touches, both who do it as growers and for their livelihood, and also the people that are patients, I mean, it changed everything for me. And so yeah, I'm very grateful for my time up there and for the community that continues to stay in touch, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. That's been my main passion too from the beginning, was like when I found out CBD inhibits cancer cells. I'm like, why is, like, as a kid, you know, in high school, I'm like, why isn't this legal? You know, and it makes you question everything that you're taught, because, you know, our founding fathers used hemp, you know, in America. And it's like, it's just interesting that like there's
the
this
Declaration
textile.
of Independence is written on hemp paper.
Exactly. And so I'm just, my whole life I've been like, make it make sense. And you know, I mean, look at what's happening now with the government. I mean, the government doesn't want to educate people. They really are only after their best interests at this point. It's pretty evident.
Yeah, I think obviously that's a whole other tangent that we could go on. But for me, I always tell people, look, I'm not telling you which way to believe. I'm just asking you to follow the money and see who benefits off of certain laws, right? So if something is illegal, that means that, you know, for every action, there's a counteraction, right? And so if something is legal or illegal, someone's benefiting it. So always just do your research on who's involved in decision making and what are the results of that, right? And obviously we know that the war on drugs failed miserably, and there was a lot of people arrested and charged, not necessarily for the right reasons. And now a lot of that's changing. But
well, the war on drugs, I think, worked out exactly the way it was supposed to work out.
True.
With the prison for profit system, let's follow the
Yeah.
money. Like when there are
Yeah.
prisons that are literally profiting off bodies being in the jails, like
Yeah.
I'd say it worked out just fine because the prison rates went
Right.
up. We have more incarcerated children in this country than the rest of the world combined. Like
Yeah.
it is what it is.
I don't know the exact statistics, but yeah, the U.S. Only has a certain population of the world, but we have the highest prison population for sure. And again, those are whole other conversations, but it's crazy, and it's all connected. You see now, information is more readily available than ever before. But the problem is there's also so much that it's hard to filter through what's real and who to trust and what to believe, right? So a lot of times it's more about, to me, it's like what resonates with you, and communicate with people that you believe in and trust, and ask their opinion, and that's why it's important to have these kind of conversations, just to bounce ideas off each other and that kind of thing. But for sure. So after high school, you had maybe not a typical high school as far as your background and some of the things you were getting involved in. After high school, what were you up to, and where were you living?
So I lived in Santa Cruz. I was going to Cabrillo. I thought I wanted to be a teacher.
I randomly, by accident, am wearing a Santa Cruz hoodie today.
Yes, shout out to Santa Cruz. So I moved there, and then I realized there was like a lot of farms around there. So I just, I was working two jobs. I was working in the math learning center at
Nice.
Cabrillo, where the tutor. I was working at the front desk, and then I worked at graphics, which was a head shop. So I worked
Nice.
at a head shop right when dabbing came out, which was super interesting and funny because the owner of the store was so happy. He was like, "There's this new thing called dabbing. Like, what's this glass?" He's like stocking the shelves, like so happy, like stocking up on butane.
No. It's for
shit?
tobacco, right? In those days, I was like, I don't know anybody that's getting that creative with their tobacco smoking apparatus.
No, man. So I was doing that, and then in Santa Cruz is where I took my first yoga class as an adult, and I was just like, wow, this needs to be accessible. And that was another mind opener, like such as cannabis or psychedelics. Like taking yoga made me realize like just how much we don't know as humans, and like you would think like breath to body movement would be so natural for us, but we do tend to like disassociate from our own bodies. And so really tapping into that helped me, and that's when I decided that I was going to be a yoga instructor. And so when I was 20, I did a season in Garberville.
Nice.
In the mountains.
Of course.
And I trimmed and I saved up for like 3 months, and then I moved to Santa Monica, and that's where I got certified to teach yoga. And then I became quickly disillusioned with the LA yoga community.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I was not vibing with it. I was accepted and people liked me, and I had a lot of friends in that community, and I still do, but yoga in LA is completely inaccessible to anybody. And my whole thing, I forgot who said
trendy.
this. Yeah, I forgot who said this, but somebody says, if it isn't accessible to the poor, it is neither radical nor revolutionary. And so there were all these people I was surrounded by who were going to yoga, sitting on their high horse, like talking this and that, like talking about spirituality, but really they don't have to implement it in their day-to-day lives. And I'm just questioning, like, how are you guys all giving back with yoga studios $200 a month? Like, you're wearing.
I mean, it's tough because on one hand, as a business person, like business is business, right? On the other hand, as a spiritual person, it's like, hey, first of all, do we have permission from the culture that we're taking this from to even use these concepts and ideas in an authentic way? And in 99.9% of the cases, the answer is no. So it's cultural appropriation, it's cultural theft, and it's complicated. I know for yourself, I don't know exactly what your ethnic background is, but I think we're similar, that we're mixed, like Latin mixed, right?
Yeah, so I'm Indigenous and Jewish and
There,
Irish.
there you go. So similar myself as well. And it's always a struggle being American, being mixed. Like, even though like your heart identifies with a certain culture, but obviously you look and sound a certain way, and that balance of never really quite being accepted by either side. But also, you know, in my heart, when I see that, like, an American, you know, being a yoga expert, it's just like, you know, or anything really, or even leading ayahuasca ceremonies in Peru, or it's like, there's
Yes.
certain things that should only be done by the people that originated it, you know, and it's tough, because we should also at the same time be able to experience it, but it's just more your mentality and the heart that you have behind it, you know.
Yeah, and the intention, even just saying like this is a sacred practice that like has originated in India, like, and just paying homage to that, like when
Yeah,
you're, teaching, like that, even that makes a difference. Like just
yeah,
like for instance, when there's like festivals or like concerts, like the Emerald Cup, like it's, there's a prayer by the local tribe that
yeah,
says
yeah,
this is sacred land, it's our
yeah,
land, and
yeah,
we are like
yeah.
allowing you to do this. Like that is so important.
I really appreciate Tim for that, for holding it down. He's somebody he's been a mentor and an uncle to all of us, and he's you know, his spiritual practice is very diverse. I'll just
Yeah.
say that, and I appreciate that, though. Growing up, kind of like, you know, on one track, being exposed to and seeing that, you know, a lot of the world's thought leaders and religious and cultural backgrounds, a lot of them are actually very similar, you know, and just showing respect for each other's diversity, and it's something that I've learned. And, you know, it's funny you bring up those two issues, and it made me think of two documentaries. One, have you seen the Bikram documentary on Netflix about Bikram yoga?
No.
Oh man. Well, I didn't realize that Bikram yoga was just a guy named Bikram, right? And
Yeah.
the whole hot yoga. And anyway, he's kind of a kind of a creeper. But if you get a chance, watch it. It's interesting for sure, especially if you have a yoga background. But the other one was Murder Mountain, right? When you mentioned Garberville,
Yeah.
and I'd heard some rumors about it, and I didn't realize we were actually up there when it was being filmed, and some of the filming was happening at Area 101, and I went back and watched it. I'm like, oh my god, like, you know, Spy Rock and all these different spots up there. I'm like, dang, like these are literally people I know in situations that, you know, like some of those grocery stores, you see the different missing signs out when you're out, you know, like getting your groceries in Garberville. You're like, dang, like it's real life up there. And there's definitely a beautiful side of the community, and there's definitely a dark
Totally.
side of the community, which is crazy. And I think whether you identify religiously or with your a movement, so to speak, whether it's cannabis or whether it's, you know, politically, not all people are the same, and saying I'm this way or that way doesn't necessarily equal this or that, right? And so kind of taking each person on an individual basis and respecting them for their individuality, instead of assuming that, oh, just because you're Republican XYZ, or just because you're liberal XYZ, or just because you smoke cannabis, that means this. You know, I think a lot of those old paradigms are fading away and being exposed.
Yeah, at the end of the day, like politics is just a societal construct. Like, I mean, it exists because somebody created it. It's not like necessarily natural to humanity. Just
Right.
like money or any other kind of like human system. Not to get super meta, but it's like
Yeah.
it only has as much power as we give it. Like, yes, they are
Right.
in power, so it does matter, and you definitely should vote, call your
Right.
Congress members, call your
Right.
senators, but like at the end of the day, we give it power,
Right.
and that just makes it exist, which is so funny about what's happening now, because so many people are clinging to like the capitalist society of like 9 to 5, like go to work, come
Yeah.
home, feed your kids go to school. And
Right.
my whole life, like I've said, I've been self-employed 3 years. Like I've, spent,
Yeah.
seasons trimming in Humboldt,
Yeah.
worked on many farms. Like I've always had like an alternative
You're
lifestyle.
you're
And
used
so
to being
I'm
off the grid. Yeah.
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 Like and the
Yeah.
whole thing of that is like I was prepared for this. Like ever since I was
Yeah.
younger, like I
Yeah.
always kind of knew like shit, this is not sustainable. Like shit is gonna have to
Yeah.
hit the fan, because when
Yeah.
I was a kid growing up, like I lived in a homeless shelter. I lived in transitional housing. Like
Mm.
I, just knew what it was like to not have, you know, security of knowing when your next meal is, and so
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
just already experiencing that, and then just
Yeah.
like having my parents who are super unique, it just kind of culminates into me being like disillusioned from a young age and kind of just
Yeah.
optimistic at the same time that humanity can choose a different way to live.
Yeah. It's tough because, you know, you grow up, whether it's programming from school or church or parents or Disney or whatever, we have these ideas of how things should be. And then you get into the real world. And now, thank God, at least, I mean, for better or for worse, with, you know, the internet, we have more access to information, which means that we have the opportunity to educate ourselves. It also means we have the opportunity to confuse ourselves, right? So, because there's so much conflicting information out there. But I think it's about what I've learned over the years is, instead of just looking for sources of information to believe in, it's more learning to trust yourself. And we talk about like having to teach children. It's really children who can teach us, right? And they come, like, children are born already kind of with more connection to the divine and to whatever you might believe in. They kind of come prepackaged, ready to go. It's all the extra stuff that we put on kids and on each other. And then by the time we're adults, it's like unlearning all of that stuff. And that's what I do appreciate about cannabis and about other things, psychedelics, that it can get you in that place, in that state of mind where you're able to look at things objectively instead of just reacting. Almost analyze yourself, you know, like, man, why does that trigger me? Like, and really actually, instead of just dumbing it down with drugs and alcohol and ignoring it, or relationships or whatever, actually reflecting and looking at your own stuff. Because it's easy to be passionate about what's wrong out there, but we're never going to have an impact out there until we deal with what's in here, right? And
Totally, like you can't be pointing the fingers all the time. Like the real revolution happens inside of you.
Yeah, well, as cheesy as it is, they say whenever you point a finger, you're pointing three back at yourself, right? So just having that mentality for sure. So you were talking earlier when we were on the phone about what's happening already in LA, you know, about people like rationing and kind of preparing economically for what's already happening. It's only been, well, worldwide, this has been going on since January, but I would say probably since the end of February, beginning of March, hasn't really affected Americans, media-wise and like practically. Like, what are you seeing in LA and people that you're talking to, some of the changes that are happening and how it's affecting people?
So people can't afford to miss work. Like people, like the poorest people are the people that are, you know, going and working at the grocery stores and like looking for jobs after they've been laid off from their other
Servers,
jobs.
bartenders, yeah, Uber drivers, yeah.
And so,
Airport.
but it's been really cool to see how quickly LA organized. Like people are starting to occupy vacant homes, and people are literally standing like arm in arm with them, protecting them, and the police are standing there. I can't do anything about it because it's too messy. Like, you know, landlords are acting crazy. They're threatening evictions if people don't pay April 1st. People are.
So there's a moratorium right now nationally and statewide. I don't know if it's gone into full effect, but they're talking about it on rent and mortgages. But what's complicated, like in LA, I was reading something, there's 15 city council members, I think, in LA, because it's so big. And I think, like, you know, 10 out of the 15 are landlords. So it's like it's a tricky thing, you know.
It is a tricky thing. The owner class has lived a very comfortable life for a long time. Like, I mean, when you're in the owner class, you can afford to, you know, have a home that you own. You get renters to pay your mortgage for that house and the house that you're currently living in that you probably also own and are paying a mortgage on. Like, you're literally profiting off someone's essential need as of a place to live. And it's funny, like, you know, we'll call cannabis an essential need, grocery stores, but isn't shelter in there too? Like food, clothing, water, shelter? Like,
yeah,
so,
for sure.
You know, for me, it's like, why aren't the landlords organizing? Why aren't you guys unionizing and trying to go to the government and say, how are we going to get paid? We know we have all of these tenants that aren't going to be able to pay come April 1st.
Yeah.
And it's just so interesting to me because, like, for instance, some girls I know, their landlord threatened that she was going to serve them with an eviction notice if they didn't pay the rent for April 1st a week early. And they called me after they literally pulled together their money, paid the rent for April 1st a couple of days ago.
Were they behind in March?
No.
Oh, yeah, that's illegal.
this landlord has a 14,000 deposit on their house. They've just lived a very privileged life, and they're not out there, researching like, oh, there's going to be moratoriums, and like they don't know like, about
Yeah.
striking or unionizing.
Yeah.
They've just lived a really privileged existence. I'm just like, whoa.
Well, so
like,
California already. I mean, I'm actually a realtor now, and so I'm a little bit more familiar with what's going on. And I do believe in buying property. I do believe in being an investor, but I also believe in being fair. Right there's a way I think that you can be successful in business and still be human and still be fair and reasonable. And you're right. I mean, I think the landlord should organize and get relief from however they can governmentally, and not necessarily always expect it from their tenants. But tenants actually, in California especially, tenants have more rights than anywhere in the country. And so she had no recourse to do that. So they actually paid ways. Yeah.
That's why she was freaking out, because she's caring about the renter strike, and she's, worried about her own life. And this is
not that I want to encourage people necessarily to not pay their bills, but if they really can't, and it's an actual issue where they can't, and it's about losing their shelter, it is months and months of process before they can actually do that. And then let's say it's probably going to be 2 to 3 months before they could actually take legal action. And even then they'd have to get the police involved to actually physically evict someone. And they're going to be so busy with that, especially in Los Angeles, that they're going to be able, there is such thing as squatter rights, whatever your political views are. Again, I know people on both sides of the fence on that. What I'm saying is, at the end of the day, considering right now, everyone should like take a deep breath and
I just say, no, you're right.
Each other.
Absolutely. And research. And like, I think like we've lost so many unions and so many people organizing that it's allowed a really unreasonable business model for a lot of industries.
Well, especially when you have people that are maybe undocumented, right? So I live in Monterey County, and it's a big agriculture community, right next to Santa Cruz County, same thing. And a lot of folks won't fight back because they don't have rights, So even if they knew their rights, in some cases they do, but they feel like they don't because they just don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to be, they want to fly under the radar because they don't want to deal with immigration or worse, So it's a tough time for a lot of people.
The first thing I saw that started to close were the restaurants. Yeah. And the restaurant model is not sustainable unless you're having low wage immigrant workers in the kitchens as janitors.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm most worried about right now is the undocumented in this country, because they've literally made so many businesses sustainable behind the scenes, working jobs that people don't really want to do. And so now they're undocumented. They are about to be displaced just like everyone else. Yeah. But when the government cuts the check for everybody to survive, they're not going to get it.
Yeah. I was going to say, when people say like, oh, they're still in our jobs, they're doing jobs that Americans don't want to do. The people that are sitting in your job are robots. So that's, that's why I really like a lot of stuff that Andrew Yang was saying. But I agree. It's tough because now they've really been promoting the census, right? And now they're really turning up the heat. They're really turning up the heat on the census. And I don't know exactly, don't quote me, but I've been seeing that like unless you sign up for census, you can't get your check. So it's a catch-22 for a lot of people, because I remember I had a government job before I moved up to Mendo to work full-time for the Cup years ago. I was working in the government sector, and there was questionable conduct by some of the people in the office, and I actually pushed to get another individual fired. But the reason why kind of exposed the leadership, and so they pulled this thing where my position was no longer necessary. They didn't fire me directly, but they like moved around the position so that I wouldn't be there. And then I had to sign this like non-disclosure, no defamation kind of thing in order to get my severance. So it was like this, and I just had to do it because I needed the money to move up north. And obviously that left a bad taste in my mouth. And I think the time is up on that thing anyway. I'm going to fight back later. But the point is, like you said, knowing your rights, having support, understanding that people can, with a few different words and verbiage, you don't realize what you're signing. All of a sudden, you've tied your hands. And people that are uneducated and unaware of those kind of things, I mean, so if anybody that's listening needs help, I'm a realtor and financial planner. Like I'm not a lawyer, but I do have a little bit more maybe understanding than the average person. Or I know you yourself as well can definitely direct people toward resources and websites that, that you can help get educated on your rights, voting, and different ways. You were talking
Definitely.
about contacting Congress. Did you find that site you
Yes,
want to use?
definitely. So there's a phone number that you can call to really easily access your senators. I'm going to start calling today. And I have the number here. We can pin it. Jordan, do you mind pinning this number
Yeah,
to the post?
go ahead.
Okay, so it's for calling your senators. It's 1-855
Yep.
999
Yep.
1663. And so right now, there's really no reason for us not to be blowing up their lines. We could be doing this during watching Netflix. Like, you can do it from your headphones while you're working on your yard. Like, there's no reason to not be calling your senators right now, calling your
Yeah.
Congress members, calling your city council members, and asking them, what are you doing about COVID-15? And demand rights. Demand that we get testing in our cities. Demand that if somebody is infected with COVID-19, that they will get door-to-door testing for those infected. We need supplies. Like, this is a humanitarian crisis. I'm scared. Because you see the way that the government handled Katrina, I saw the hot mess that FEMA was. Like, FEMA is unequipped. Like, everyone was like making fun of, like, when Fire Festival happened, like they were using the FEMA tents. Like, I'm here and I'm ready to help my community in whatever way I can serve. But honestly, at the end of the day, like, we have to put them in the hot seat because they're not going to advocate for us. They're worried about losing their subsidies or their lobbying money from the airline industry, the cruise ship industry, and all of these major polluters of the world. They're worried about losing that money.
Yeah, that's one positive about this is that the Earth has gotten a 2-week break from pollution.
Yes.
I think I saw that the canals in Venice are clear for the first time in like 80 years. China has like a little bit of a break, and I mean it's crazy. So it's in some ways we're the virus, right? We're the ones causing the problems on this planet.
No, we're not. We aren't the virus. That's the thing, because we're all still here, and look at how the Earth is thriving. It's the unsustainability. That's one thing that I disagree with.
That's what I mean. Yeah. Well, I mean
good.
that like the way that things are structured is the virus, right? The society as we live it now is not sustainable. And now that you see the third world becoming the first world, right? So China and India are developing a middle class. Well, they have a lot more people than we do. So to maintain the American lifestyle at its current rate is already not sustainable. And now that these other countries around the world are also wanting to live that same life economically and socially, it's really not sustainable. And so I do appreciate my time in the Triangle of learning that there are people out there that are living that regenerative lifestyle, that are living that, community. People up there kind of move there or live there intentionally for those reasons, to pursue that lifestyle. And they're built for times like this. And on one hand, either this is the end or this is just a test. Either way, we failed miserably. And for me, even though mentally I'm kind of prepared for whatever, like practically, I'm like, oh, I was not prepared. And it's giving me definitely a wake-up call to like, get organized. And of course, I do believe in activism. I do believe in making your voice heard, like on a bigger scale. But I also really believe that what's more important is your core group of family and friends, making sure you are on point, healthy, organized. I talked with my friend Lulu, who's on here right now, about organizing your information and making sure your files are in order, making sure like you know where everything's at, making sure you have your assets accounted for, and just having a plan. Like right now, everyone's freaking out because we can't go to our favorite restaurant or we can't go to school. But what happens if we lose power or we lose water or we lose Wi-Fi? What happens?
Totally. And that's why I'm a huge supporter of Wi-Fi being a utility, just like, water, heat. Like it's proven that it's a necessary need. And nowadays, like us humans, we're more cyborgs than humans. Our phones are literally an extension of ourselves.
Yeah.
Like
for sure.
your phone, like we are a camera, we are a GPS. Like, and I listened to this really interesting podcast. I forgot what his name is, but I think it was Mark Graves is his name, and he talks about how evolutionarily, we are not equipped yet to process all of the information that we're getting at the rate we're getting that.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
And
Definitely.
so, like, even just like all these downloads we get, we have to know that, like, going into it, like, well, we kind of just bombard ourselves with information, especially at a time like this. Like, we're hungry for info, we want to know what's going on, we're stuck at home. Something that's been helping me stay grounded throughout this whole thing is that every time I, like, go on my phone, I know that, like, I can only process so much, and I don't
Yeah.
try to overwhelm myself,
Yeah.
and I do check my sources and just, still try to laugh, but also, like, only take in a little
Yeah.
at a time.
Well, it's like drinking from a fire hose, right? It's just like with information. And what is cool, I do agree with you on that. What is cool though is that you can actually control and edit what you consume, right? Just like your diet of food, you can do the same thing with media and technology. And I don't know if you've heard of the concept of reticular activator, but basically what it is it's a thing in your mind because we're literally like, if our conscious mind could understand what our subconscious mind is processing at all times, you're right, it would be overwhelming. Like we cannot, because there's
Totally.
so much going on around us at all times, our senses are constantly working at all times. So we narrow it down. And that's a beautiful thing, but it's also a dangerous thing, right? So similarly with social media, people that only like certain things, right? Let's say if you're conservative, let's say you support Trump or you support Bernie. What you do online is going to, the algorithm on every site, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, is going to continually show you what you already believe, right? So you're following all the people that agree with you. You're following all the negativity toward the other side, all the positivity toward your side. So you're getting fed whatever you like. They're getting fed whatever they like. And both are alternative realities, right? And then there's the actual truth that's over here somewhere that you have to actually fight for to get to.
That's why
Anyway.
I follow Breitbart or Brett Bart, like
Yeah,
super conservative. I follow a ton
yeah,
of
yeah,
super conservative, racist ass alt-right shit, and I just look at it and I read it. I read the comments. I just like to know what other people's opinions are. I don't ever engage. Like, I'm not commenting, trying to, like,
yeah,
be like, go
yeah,
Bernie, like,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
anti-capitalist, like, fuck you.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
doing
yeah,
that, because I
yeah,
don't have the energy. But, like,
yeah,
I definitely do like to keep both sides in mind, because there are certain
yeah,
things that, like, overlap. Like, for instance, like, I'm
for
a
sure.
huge supporter of the Second Amendment, and, like,
Yeah, yeah,
I a lot of
yeah,
my friends don't necessarily agree with me, but, like,
right, right.
I believe the access to bear arms is, the cat's out of the bag already on that one. So, like,
Yeah, I think. Well, it's funny because it's like people, people are preparing for an apocalypse. I'm like, look, you're not going to win a shootout with the military. That's not going to happen. What it's for is protecting you from everyone else.
yeah, I think about that
That's how
all the
it gets
time.
crazy.
Like,
Yeah,
that ship sailed, and so, like,
yeah,
like, the military, has freaking weapons that we do not have access to. So
yeah,
definitely not about that. But, like, if
yeah,
it turns into some, like, Walking Dead, like, zombie
yeah,
apocalypse, like, people
yeah, yeah,
roaming the
yeah,
street,
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
maybe, like,
yeah.
fuck.
Which is, I'm probably going to get on a Walking Dead marathon later, but no. Well, let's see if anybody has questions. Please, the little question mark down there at the bottom, you can question there, or just write it out and we'll read it out. If you have any questions for Ray or myself, we're just going to talk for a few more minutes and just kind of, there's obviously a lot that we could cover, and I've already agreed to do a more formal sit down with better cameras somewhere down the road. But I'm very grateful that you agreed to do this today. I think it's cool. It's fun. I think there's a lot more of these going on now because people are home, right? I don't know if you saw DJ D Nice. He had like
Yes.
100,000 on his live, which is really cool. But I see all my DJ friends DJing and everyone else doing their thing, fitness trainers doing their thing. So it's kind of cool. People are adapting, to a different reality.
Yeah. That's all that we can do. And I truly believe every human is forever changed from this. It's like the world
Yeah.
took, like, a giant hit of like mushrooms or something.
Yeah.
You know,
The
it's a
world, the
trip.
world,
This is
need,
a trip.
the world needs to take a deep breath.
It does. This really has been a psychedelic experience. Like, you know, it's wild. But yeah,
Yeah.
necessary. I mean, we have to level up, you know, like I was saying, like we, you know, evolutionarily, we're not used to this much data. We're not used to knowing this much and having access to so many things. And now, like, we have to decide what to do with it. Like, we have all this
Right.
information, we have all these resources. Like, the infrastructure is here. You know, like we don't have to let this crumble. Like, everyone can go back to work and like,
Yeah.
you know, like after these, like these major like depressions, like there's always some kind of like evolutionary upgrade.
Yeah. As you said cyborg earlier, I would say
Yes.
hybrid. I would say hybrid, and I like both concepts. But for me,
I love
because
that.
it was the same way for me. Like I'm either like in a suit, right, and I work in Silicon Valley, and that whole energy, or I'm like just hippie out in the woods, like getting dirty and working on the farm and all that kind of stuff. So like I'm happy in both places. And I think having that, you know, with your background with yoga and with cannabis and kind of spirituality, but also being very tech savvy and being a content creator, like what are some things, some best practices moving forward in light of all the new changes that you're kind of, you know, honing in on to kind of live a hybrid life, but also like in the healthiest way possible?
Well, I want to work on like working with the earth more, like putting my hands in dirt, like getting outside, planting a garden. Haven't got to that yet, but that's one thing that's like my personal goal that I think everybody
Okay.
should be doing if you can do it. And then things that I've been doing have been yoga. Um, I mean, I've only done it 3 times. I'm on day 12 of quarantine. I've only done it 3 times, but it helps, you know?
Yeah.
Like I try to meditate. That's easier for me than like a physical practice where I will just like lay down and close my eyes and like just be present. Like what
Yeah.
I do is like here, we'll do it right now. So plant both of your feet on the ground.
Okay.
Uncross your legs. Let your toes ground down into the earth. Deep breath in on a 4 count. Exhale, 4 count. One more deep breath in. Exhale, 4 count. So open your eyes. It helps to even just like sitting in the chair and doing that. And after you do this, just feeling your own body, like touch your knees, like touch
Yeah.
your thighs, like feel yourself. And then look around and just notice 3 things in the room. 3 things that catch your eye.
Hmm.
And then just thinking it. So like right now I see a purple triangle decal on the wall. And now I'm looking at prayer flags. And now I'm looking at a picture of trees. So like just doing that instantly can take you out of like a negative thought or a bad thought
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. For sure. And I appreciate you doing that. Actually helped me a lot. I'm guilty of being too just overwhelmed with anxiety or technology or whatever it is, and kind of a high energy person. But it does take work, right? Fitness takes work. Spirituality takes work. If you're gonna grow anything, whether it's cannabis or vegetables or fruit, you're gonna have to cultivate the land. And sometimes you got to pull out weeds, and we all have those weeds of negativity, right? Whether it's from our family or from our experience or from the media or whatever it is. And it takes work, and our brain and our heart, it really is like a garden, you know, to not to be weird, but to use that metaphor of you have to protect it, and it takes work to cultivate things. And where did you learn that practice?
I actually learned it from one of my mentors. Her name is Hala Corey.
Cool.
She is a trauma-informed yoga teacher. And
I think I follow her.
yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, she's one of my OGs. And it's her teachings with Off the Mat into the World were the first time I ever heard about scholarships for yoga. And I applied and I got a scholarship. And it was just this wild synchronicity because she was friends with one of my other OGs, Layla Steinberg, who was like the officiant at my grandma's second wedding when
Oh, wow.
Layla was 14. And what's wild is after Layla did that in Topanga Canyon, and like grew up being best friends with like my auntie and like my dad and stuff, she went on to move to Marin County, and Tupac Shakur came to one of her writing lessons. And
Oh, wow.
her like she had writing workshops and open mics. And actually it was in Oakland. She was living in Marin at the time, but the workshop was in Oakland. And she heard him, and then she was like, you need to like quit doing this gangbang shit. You can live with me, but you have to like write. And she was his manager and roommate for 3 years, for the first 3 years of his career.
Yeah, he's a poet for sure. That's amazing. Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
So like a couple of my OGs have just been doing amazing things, like Hala, for instance, where I learned that meditation from. Like she is a super big activist when it comes to teaching people about trauma and like ways that you can recover from PTSD. And I think that's what a lot of people are suffering from without knowing it is PTSD.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think I became more aware of it, kind of had a rough upbringing, and just kind of tried to overcome it with personality and enthusiasm and charisma or positivity, and that can only go so far. We do have to, I think, take time to realize those issues in us that are broken, or where we have issues, and where we're triggered, and do some of that work. So I was fortunate to learn a lot of that, like with Tim. Started meditating with Tim. I was like, what? Because I was used to prayer in church, right? But it's a little bit different. And it's just that taking responsibility for your own energy and your own healing, and how you interact with the world. I think if more people did that, we would be obviously a much better world.
Totally. COVID-19 is a vibe check on humanity. And
sure.
I keep making this joke. Are the zoos an essential business right now? Like, are people walking the zoos? Because literally one of my biggest fears in life, I've been saying this for years, people who know me know, one of my biggest fears is seeing a cheetah in the wild, or like a cat, and like making eye contact with like a lion or some shit. Like that would scare the absolute shit out of me. So like I am just thinking it's hilarious that like
I'm sure there's a plan. I'm sure there's a plan in place for them, but yeah, that's a good point. Have you seen another documentary on Netflix, the tiger one, where people own tigers? Have you seen that?
Oh my gosh, no! I'm saving that for later. Right now, I'm in the middle of the of American Horror Story Coven. It's the American Horror Story show about, but this season is about witches.
How's that so far?
It's so good. I love it.
Yeah,
it's pretty good. It's. I think they could have switched up. The casting is like not very diverse. It's kind of just like a bunch of white blonde witches. So I don't relate as much, but
for sure.
I like some of their messages.
Well, it's funny that, different people have different beliefs based on their experiences, right? And for me, like growing up kind of traditional Christian church, like they have one perspective on certain things. And so I've always been a very spiritual person. And then in my progress, I evolved in that. But I remember speaking to that one time, being in New Orleans and being in the French Quarter and running into like a voodoo lady from Haiti, and it was like, oh wow, it was just, we both kind of like locked eyes, and it was like
completely different life.
Yeah. Whoa, yeah. You could see the energy, and there's definitely it's a hyper. Whatever your beliefs are, from astrology to spirituality to even witchcraft or technology, it's a spectrum of things, right? And people make a lot of assumptions about things that they don't know about. And I think if we would take the time to really listen and hear each other, I don't know, there's answers in places that you wouldn't expect.
Yes, I love that. That is like such a good note, I think, to wrap it up on. Like,
yeah.
I love this quote. I posted it the other day, but it's We are all just walking each other home.
Wow.
Ram Dass. Yeah, like
I
it's so
like that.
simple, you know, but that's all we're really doing. And I think
I,
like we needed a vibe check back to that.
I like
It's like,
that. So that is a great note to end on. Thank you for your time. What's your last thought in light of what you just said? What's something we can leave with, and where can everybody follow you? And you know, we'll get back together again soon. But again, thank you for your time. Where can we follow you, and what do you want to end on? What's the last thought?
yeah, definitely. I have some old blog posts that would be kind of maybe interesting to go read. If you click the link in my bio, I actually have some cool tutorials on there, like
Cool.
how to make plant shelves, how to I converted actually a shed into a sanctuary, and that's like one of my proudest projects that I have on there, and I give like
Awesome.
a step by step of like literally everything that I did with photos and words and just like fun projects kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it's like pretty old, but it's kind of like a cool time capsule.
No, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, people got time for projects right
Right.
now. And what was the last thing that you would want to say to everybody to kind of leave for the day, like just energetically, and what's a thought you want to leave us with?
Okay. I would say that like I know it's scary. The unknown is always scary. You know, I know that it's really easy right now to resort to panic, but when you're panic, you're not present. So
Mm,
right now more than ever, like we don't know what the future holds. So all that we can do is focus on the right now. Like what
mm,
can you do that's making you feel empowered, that's making you feel healthy, that's making you feel important. Call your grandparents, call your mother, call your father,
mm,
call your sister, call your family. Like that's something that I haven't been doing enough. Like
mm.
stay connected, like, and you know, if you need help, ask for it. Ask for it on social media, ask your community.
Yeah.
Don't be scared. Everybody is hurting right now and it's scary times and you never
Yeah.
know like what reaching out can do. And I'm always here in my DM. Like I have a ton of resources.
Yeah. Same here.
And so in my next post, I'm going to post resources and do links and stuff like that. It
Awesome.
might take me like a few hours to write it, but I'll try to get that up as soon as I can.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of comments. We had a lot of people join us today. I appreciate your time. We'll be in touch, and
Yeah.
thank you, and have a great day.
Okay. You
Thank
too.
you.
Bye, Jordan. Thank
Bye.
you.